when I was learning photography, I couldn't make sense of locations. Locations were all different. What do you see in front of you?
In front of me, a fireplace.
A fireplace. Good. Pepe, what do you see underneath your feet? What is this called?
A rug?
What is this? It's a rug. Fantastic. What happens if you go to a new location and they don't have a rug?
Improvise.
Right? Like, what happens if you have, what I mean is there's about 10 trillion objects you're going to run into in photography. Mm-hmm. 10 trillion. Or maybe that's an understatement. Maybe like 50 bazillion trillion elements. So instead of looking at the elements for what objects they are, the only way it would make sense to me to not be limited by those particular objects is to transform them in my eye from what they are to what form they make. Does that make any sense? Yeah. For example, this rug is a rug. Yes. But to me, to make sense out of this rug, this is nothing more than a set of patterns. Does that make sense? This is just a set of patterns that I can use. So when I walked into this room, my eyes went patterns. My eyes didn't think rug. When I saw that piano, I saw it had a black lacquer. My brain said reflection, possible reflection with a video light, not, oh look, there's a piano. When I saw the fireplace, first of all, this is like a fake fire. Like, I'm not getting any heat from this whatsoever. Right, nothing. When I saw this fireplace, I saw a square, not just a fireplace. When I saw that mirror, it wasn't just a mirror. That mirror has a frame, and that frame is full of rectangles, and look at all the rectangles this mirror has. So what can I do with that mirror? Well, nothing, because it's too high. But if it was lower, I can do stuff with those rectangles to create something out of that mirror. Okay? You see that wall over there? That wall next to that curtain, that's not a wall. That's a single color background. It's monochromatic. If you have a single color behind your subjects, are you going to distract from your subjects? Absolutely not. So if you start thinking in terms of what the gifts are instead of what the objects actually are, you're starting your transformation and you're starting to evolve already. Okay? Let's see, Fran. Can you stand up here for a second?
Sure.
Okay, forget the fact that they're candles. What shape do they make?
Like cylinders.
Correct. Okay. You see this little tool here?
The vase.
The vase? Mm-hmm. You see that there's a shadow in the back of the vase?
Yes.
So now you have a white wall, you can cast a shadow on that white wall, can't you?
Yeah.
So now a wall not only is it a clean color background for your subjects, but now it's a potential shadow that you could create. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Before you sat down in that couch, you probably would have thought that's just a vase and those are just candles.
Yeah.
But now you realize if I have a blank wall, I can do two things. Well, more than that, but I can do two things. Mm-hmm. I can make my subject stand out because there's no distraction because it's a seamless one single color background.
Right.
I can, do you see this? You see how this background has like a texture to it?
Yeah, I noticed that.
Okay. Is that a problem? Texture is distracting to your subject, so how do you fix it?
Okay.
You change your aperture. You go further away,
So
you put your subjects here, this becomes a creamy white because it's all blurry now.
Blurry.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But the wall can also leave behind this shadow, and it can leave behind its color, which is what you want because it's a seamless color.
Right.
Right? Mm-hmm. You have a couch here.
Yes.
The couch is made out of a neutral pastel-y color.
Yeah.
If you're going to be shooting details and stuff or anything like that, this is going to be a good background for you because it doesn't have any crazy polka dot patterns or anything like that. Does that make sense?
So it's not distracting.
It's not distracting. So it's also an opportunity for you to put the person sitting down on the floor and rest their back. You can do a lot of different things with this.
Right.
Look at that wall over there. You see that shadow by that lamp?
Yeah.
See how it just starts to go endless?
Yeah, it does.
That's why it's important to look at locations, not for what objects they are, but what forms they make and what gifts they can give you. Okay? Right. Okay, thank you, friend.
No worries.
So this is where all this comes from. Now, I'm going to go through them real quickly because I don't know if people can read this online. But this is talking about geometry of things. When I drove into this place, I saw there was like geometry everywhere, okay? Now remember, don't look at the driveway as a driveway, look at it as some sort of form, geometric form you can use, okay? Balance is complicated. Chapter 2 in my book, by the way. Balance with objects. There's balance with objects, and then there's balance with people. For example, I'm going to draw in my little whiteboard. And I'm not going to run over your cables. That's probably a good thing, right? Okay, let me see here. Okay, you have a location like this. You have a really cool door here. There's a little door. The door is red. This door is a rectangle. The door can be a frame. And frame is part of my location chart. So if you look at this is like playing a little game. It's like you pull little things and you kind of use them. You're like, this location has reflection, symmetry, color elements, frames, walls. See what I mean? Now, what can you do with all these things? Thousands of stuff. That's the problem. That's why it takes a long time. Okay, frames. You have a background like that. You want to use the frame. So most people would put their subject inside the frame. Is that fair to say? Because trust me, I'm a judge for the photo competitions. I see the doors. I see the person inside the door all the time. Now, what's wrong with this picture? No balance. See, this is an element of interest. So I want to write this down here. Element. I'm going to put elements of interest. Who should be your main element of interest? Your subjects. So any other element of interest has to either not compete with your subjects. Any other element of interest has to balance your subjects, so it can be harmonious, or whatever you say it. Is that right? Did I pronounce it okay? So if you have a person here, I look at the scene and I say, this distance from here to here should be pretty equal to the distance between here and here. And then I'll put my subjects there. Does that make sense? Yeah. Now, why does this distance have to be similar?
It's a balance.
Right. Like, what happens if you have a photo? What happens if you have a photo like this, and this person is right here, and the other person is right here? Doesn't that look like you're claustrophobic? Like you're smashing the guy into a little box and he wants to get up, but you won't let him? Because he's stuck in the little box forever and ever, right? Yeah. So balance has a lot to do with these things. So once we get out to do the photo shoot, you always have to ask yourself, if you have multiple elements of interest in a scene, which you always do, which interest point do you choose to balance with? And my solution to that is always, what's the brightest, most distracting element of interest? And for example, if you have a scene and you have a door and this door is red, that's the brightest. So let's say you have clouds and you have a tree. I mean, that's not a tree, that's a person. You have a tree, you have little branches, it's happy, okay? But the tree is brown, and you're like in a park where there's all their brown colors around. To me, that tree kind of starts to blend in, and it's no longer a threat to my subjects. But that red door is screaming, look at me. Don't look at the subjects, look at me. I am the door, and I am red. I demand attention. See what I'm saying? So if you ever have that, ask yourself, what's the brightest, most distracting? If you don't have one that's really bright, then ask yourself what's the biggest. Okay, and if you don't have a biggest, then you're in big trouble. Actually, the other one is what is repetitive. Like, which one is the brightest, most distracting? The next one is which one's the biggest element in the scene that's going to be distracting? And the third is which parts of these elements are repetitive. They're repeating each other. And if you find, like, let's say you have some grass, and the grass is going to go on like this. Where do you put the person now?
On the left.
You have a tree here. Where do you put the person?
On the left.
If the tree's not distracting, then you would put it
The tree's
same
no longer,
dis-
it's not
the same
distracting you
distance-
because it's the same kind of color.
the same distance from the edge of the frame. On
This
the
is going to
other side.
distract, the viewer of your photo is going to be more attracted to the repetition. So you want to balance it with this, not with this. If you put your subjects here, because you were trying to balance with the tree, you're going to be screwing up your photo right away. By the way, that's just a little taste of one of them. That's just a taste of one square. I mean, this can go on for a long time. But when you go home, especially the person that has kids and stuff, you all have 5 minutes to go outside and walk around. You can, without a camera, you can just be like, that's repetitive, that's the brightest, that's the biggest. That's repetitive, that's the brightest, that's the biggest. And then when you walk into a scene, you're like, that's the brightest, stand over here. That's repetitive, stand over here. Then you start to learn how to make poetry instead of just words or sentences, okay? Okay, let's talk about shadows, which is going to be a pretty big subject. Shadows, guys, are things, if you have shadows in your environment that are already there, then you can use the shadow. And the shadow will become the brightest because it's the most contrasting. It's the most distracting. So you can either put the person right there and don't balance it, or you can balance with the shadow. Does that make sense? You can create shadows. Like you can use this tool. You can put this tool by a white wall. You can put a flash through this tool, and these little squares will show up here, and you can put your subject and frame your subjects with the shadow. That's another thing you could do. I do this all the time. In fact, I just shot a wedding last weekend, and the groom was like, "What are you doing?" Because I was like, see what I mean? But then we saw the photo. He was like, "Oh my God!" Like, I'll show you guys the photo too. He was just like, "Dude, what the heck is wrong with you?" Right? Because they don't understand that you can use objects to create shadows. So whenever I walk into a room, I look at the shapes of everything, like the back of chairs. Obviously, those chairs don't have any mesh, but the back of chairs, any kind of element that's here that you can use to create a shadow can be used. These are the gifts that location is giving you. You have to find them, okay? Reflections. By reflections, I don't just mean have the person look at herself in the mirror. That's like, remember, poetry means don't go by the obvious. Doesn't poetry have some sort of like hidden meaning? You have to kind of find it. So if you have a mirror, don't be like, mirror, oh my God, I have an idea. Let's put the bride in front of the mirror and just have her look at herself. Because that's not poetry. Find the meaning of the mirror. Like get the mirror power without the obvious choice, okay? Let me talk about this one. This is one of the most important ones. Color elements. Oh boy, color elements is huge because color elements is the main source of distraction from people, okay? Whenever I'm looking at a scene, I ask myself, is that background 3 color elements or less? And if the answer is no, there's 10,000 colors in the background, I do not shoot in that background. If my question is there a monochromatic color? Like, is there anywhere where I have a single color? If the answer is yes, I'm going to be using it for a portrait somewhere. I don't care if it's got texture, little thingies, I don't care what it is, because with aperture, you can get rid of all of that. Now, what happens if you have a location where you do have 10,000 colors and you have to use it? Then the answer to that is, or the question is are those colors part of the same color family? Because if they are, they blend into the background. But if they don't, they create a contrast. Does that make sense? And the worst colors you can have in the background are the primary colors, red, green, and blue. Trust me, a picture with something red in the background, it's gonna draw your viewer's attention right to that red. That's why photos in grass don't work. Grass is green. Green is a primary color. Your eye goes whoop right to the grass. And your subjects become like secondary. Whenever I take grass pictures, if I ever do, I try not to. I try not to show the grass. But if I have to show the grass, I tone it down later. Make sure that the green is very muted. Okay? So let me repeat what I just said. The same color family is colors that are all going to blend in together. Let me give you an example of this place here. Let's see. Could you pass me that pillow behind you? Does that pillow come out? No. Okay.
There are some little pillows around some. There were some pillows. Solid color or?
Here we go. Okay. If you went to Photoshop and you put your little eyedropper into this, there's going to be about 10,000 million colors here. Is that not right? Oh, even better. But are these colors all part of the same color family? Are they all different shades of brown? Therefore, when you take a picture, because it all will become part of like a mesh of neutral colors that don't distract, it's a good choice for a background. Now this one, same thing. This won't distract you, even though there's a lot of colors here, because they're all part of this crazy, whatever you call this type of color. What is this? Yeah, it's like a rustic, right? These in the background, and this is a little more dangerous because it's got kind of like a red, right? But it's not really red, it's kind of like a wine color, like a burgundy or something. But this background won't be as distracting because it's all part of the same color family. It's all part of the same color palette. When we go outside and we do photo shoots, I'm gonna challenge you to say, you have to shoot here. And you're gonna have to angle the camera to find the same color palette in the background, single color in the background, or you're gonna have to balance with colors in the background. That's the third one. The third one is, if you do have colors and they're not part of the same color family, can you find a way to balance those colors with your subjects? And if the answer is yes, you can shoot there. If the answer is no, it's gonna be distracting. It's not gonna help you, okay? So, thank you. The next one is, let's talk about this one, patterns and repetitions. When we go out there, you see why when I enter this room, this rock became a pattern, and the pattern repeats itself. You see that? You can use this as a background because it has patterns and repetitions. That's the gift of it. If you look at this thing here, okay, you look at this, pine cones. These pine cones make patterns and repetitions when you put them all together. Therefore, this is not a distracting element. Patterns and repetitions, your brain kind of like throws them out. Your brain says, it's just a pattern, I can throw it out. That's why people use patterns in like in wallpaper, right? So in wallpaper, you want the furniture to stand out, not the wallpaper. So the wallpaper is full of pattern. Even though it's a pattern, because the pattern repeats itself, your brain dismisses it. So when we go out, I'm gonna ask you, where's the pattern and a repetition here? And then you're gonna learn to use it with balance. You have to put all these things together, okay? Let's talk about contrasts. Contrast, the most important contrast I like to discuss is contrast of light. When you have a dark room with a bright light outside. When you have anything that's dark and bright, it's going to be an exciting photograph for you, okay? If you do not look for contrasts, you're going to walk around these beautiful gifts and you'll totally dismiss them. You walk right by them because you'll be looking for the fountain in the park. Now you see how the fountain in the park is nothing? Fountain in the park is like the worst possible choice in the world. unless the bride asks you or they make you, right? Unless you can use that in a cool way, in this way, Lens flare. Lens flare, I want to talk about that real quick. If you use the whole point of lens flare is to create romance in a photograph. But if that romance comes at a price of having the sun in the background, that sun becomes the brightest point, and that's not going to help you. Remember, you want your subject's face to be the brightest point in the photograph all the time. So when you use lens flare, it's because you say, I want to create a romantic image. How do I do that? I use lens flare. I don't have the sun. The sun's at 12 o'clock. Use a flash. Put the flash behind them. That's the sun. Or I don't have a flash, but the sun is right there. Okay, I can use the sun now. Do you put the sun in the photo, or do you crop the sun out? You have to crop the sun out. Because if you leave it there, yeah, it's going to look romantic and all, but then the sun is going to just grab your attention. Okay? We're going to go on break, and I talked about some of those most important ones, like the frames and the repetitions and all this stuff. When we come back, we're going to start doing the photo reviews by everybody. And I'm going to discuss these little anchor points for posing, which became like my grammar for posing. This, I call them my lucky sevens, because it's 7, 7, 7. This is what I do all the time. 7 points here, 7 points here, and 7 execution points. Those 21 points, if you know them, you memorize them, and you master them, you will not have 110, 1,000 poses in an hour. You will have 10 million to choose from for the rest of your life. You will not have 10 poses in 10 seconds. You will have unlimited poses for the rest of your life. Okay? This is the 7. And we'll discuss them, okay? Straight spine, position head tilting by... This is going to sound very complicated. We'll do this when we come back from the break. But you can take a look at them right now.
Roberto, I'm so excited to have a million, billion
Yeah.
posing techniques.
It's 1.25 million.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Let me reel that back
Yeah.
in a little bit.
We want to make sure we keep it understated. It's 1.25. What I mean is it will be pretty hard for you to run out of ideas.
Yeah.
Okay.
That
All right,
sounds
guys.
amazing.
So
Do you want to
we'll
take
go on
some
break.
Q&A before
Yeah,
we
please.
go to break?
Yeah.
All right, let's ask some questions. Do we have any questions in the audience? Oh, we do?
Earlier you said you could use this rug as a background. In general, how would you make a rug a background? Like just shooting from above, mostly?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if you cannot stand to get a good vantage point, then you can use the 16 to 35 millimeter, which is going to make it look like you're 20 feet up in the air. If you zoom out to 60 millimeters, if you do point and shoot, you will develop this crazy depth. It's going to look like you're 20 feet up in the air. Of course, remember what I said. No matter what photo you take, no matter what you do, your subject's face has to be the brightest point of the photo. Like, fix that somehow. I mean, we're going to be talking about how to create equal ratios of the body. I mean, it gets pretty heavy, which is why you can always review this, rewind and play it again, and rewind and play it again. You're going to need to.
Practice.
Okay?
You're going to need to practice.
Yeah,
What
just
you're
going to
telling
go
us.
over it a lot of times.
We have a
have
couple
more
more
questions.
questions. and
Yeah.
then we'll go to-
Okay.
Ask away.
All right, a couple people have asked. This Elvis Say had asked how to balance the colors of the background with the color of clothes. Which ones are better? And Andy Martin had also asked, does this color theory apply to the clothing the client wears?
No. The colors that your client wears doesn't have anything to do with what I was talking about. I was talking about the colors of the background. Whatever's going to be in your frame behind your subjects is what I was talking about. Okay? Remember, just red, green, and blues are dangerous colors to have in your background unless they are a single color.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it comes from watching. I get very obsessed with studying photography. I don't know if you can tell. But 10,000 bazillion photos afterwards, you start to realize, why does this photo not look very
Right.
good if everything is so nice about it? And then you realize you can't enjoy the photo because your eye's all over the place, because your brain won't let you.
Right.
It's like, here's red, here's green, here's blue. It's like, You know what I mean? Here's a frame. It's like the picture's very weighted on the right. You have a frame, you have a person, you have all this stuff happening on the right side, and there's like nothing on the left, and it's just like, oh, I hate it. You know what I mean? And you don't know what's wrong, but something's wrong.
Right.
Um,
One more question for you, maybe, before we go to break.
no, yeah, ask away.
Okay,
yeah.
cool. So a couple people asked this, Debbie and CC Liz and Alana Damron, who's saying, how do you practice if you don't have a subject to shoot every day? And say if you are a wedding photographer, do you set up fake weddings or do you practice in other ways?
Okay, if you make your practice sessions complicated, you're never going to do it. Like what I said earlier today, you don't have to have anyone except your eyes and take a 5-minute walk and try to identify these elements in the scene in front of you. Like you can say, there's a pattern, there's a circle, there's a wall. What can I do with a wall? I can make a shadow there. I can put her as a background for a single color. There's colors, but they're all part of the same family, so I could use that as a background. These colors here are not part of the same family. I'm not gonna go there. See what I mean? You can do it without a camera, and you can do it for 5 minutes. It's not really complicated. Some people say like, oh, I have to call the coordinator, and I have to get like a flower arrangement, and I have to get models. And by the time you do that, you'll never do it, or you'll do it once in your career. You know.
Well, you use a teddy bear.
I use bananas, teddy bears.
Yeah.
You know, everybody knows. Remember when I did that? I think were you there
At where?
when I showed all my sessions that I practiced with bananas and stuff?
The teddy bear, yeah.
Yeah. Banana skin is good because it resembles human skin. So when I was trying to practice with like the ice light, or when I tried to see how it will behave on a person, I just bust out the fruits, you know, and I kind of like take a look. You'll be surprised how many poses came out of straight fruit shots. Like I even tell my clients when they come to meet with me, sometimes when we have 2 glasses of wine and stuff, sometimes they're like, this photo's amazing, how did you come up with it? And I actually show them the photo of like the apple and stuff. And I'm like, well, this photo came from this. I've practiced balance a lot with different fruits. Like I put 2 apples and then I try to find balance instinctively. Because what happens is when you get nervous and you're in the middle of a shoot, yeah, you know you're supposed to balance, but your brain forgets all about that because you're so nervous and you're in the middle of a shoot. So this way your brain is instinctive. Like you look at it and you're like, and your brain like goes back to your little workout session that you had, and it like pulls information and you're like, oh yeah, and you take a picture, you know? And then you can concentrate in your job, in creating cool photos instead of just like messing around with the buttons and stuff.
Roberto, I love what you said about if it's too difficult, you won't do it. Because
It
that's
is,
so
yeah.
true. If you make things way too complicated, you'll procrastinate even more. So I really appreciate that.
And also do it step by step. Like some guy came up to me one time at a workshop and said, well, I practiced with like 10 flash setup, and I'm like, I never got anywhere. I'm like, well, yeah. Like I don't even get anywhere with 10 flash setup. Like who the heck does that? Like start out with 1, get to know that one, add another one, see what you can do with 2, and maybe do 3 if you really need to, but you don't really need to do that. And do it very systematically so your brain remembers. And try to pull 2 or 3 main points from each session that your brain can remember. You try to do 35 points in one session, you'll forget all 35, you know?